Hello, everyone. I'll share my screen. Oh, happy Friday. Hope everybody's doing good.
Friday.
I'm excited for Friday. It's going to be a good one. I think this call will be fun, and I hope that everybody enjoys it. I know we're still waiting for a few people to come up, but I will get moving a little bit on some of these things. This week we're talking about patterns. So
Yay.
I'm really excited about that. I think patterns are very much the source of everything in our world. So it would be really hard to have a conversation about Clo without having a conversation about patterns. And just to remind you guys kind of why we're here, we are working through, we are all kind of at different levels of learning Clo, some of us a little bit more experienced, Monica and Trudy, Jasmine, some of us a little less experienced, Colleen and myself. And Colleen and myself have more industry experience, while these guys have a little bit more Clo experience, and Monica's kind of the hybrid in between. She's got lots of experience in both realms, so kudos to Monica. And yeah, I want to just run through quickly what we're going to talk through on the agenda today, just to give you guys some reminders and know what's up. We are, we'll walk through our quick introductions on the next slide, reminder of who we are. We are going to talk real quick about materials and give you some updates there based on some of the questions we got in the first week. Then we are going to talk about, how to start with a factory generated pattern and how to import it into Clo and work with it. And then we're going to talk about the best tools for pattern creation and how to create your own patterns, where to find them, things like that. And then we'll have a little Q&A section at the end. Yeah, and then I think the question that we had talked about, we had originally set this up as like a pattern power hour, and we were thinking we would walk through one of our production patterns from like reverse from front order, actually, from the very beginning through the end. And we realized that there's so much to talk about in this conversation that, we kind of had decided to hold that off. We're really curious if that's like of great interest to people, because if it is, it might be something that we work on down the line and or maybe even in next week's call. But generally speaking, we just kind of wanted to get a taste and see how much people are interested in that. But for now, we're going to try and keep it to some of these more clear and specific conversational areas around patterns, because they're just really necessary evils when it comes to target patterns in Clo, especially. So if you have an interest in walking through a pattern from beginning to through production pattern, let us know in the comments and or send us an email. Let me know. I'm just going to remind you guys a little bit of the people on this call. I'm Kristen. I've got 14 years of experience. I've got Monica, Trudy, Colleen, Jasmine. And yeah, we're going to all, start walking you through some of the agenda items very soon. I'm going to actually stop sharing now, and I'm going to let Trudy hop on, and we will start with the materials follow-up.
Okay, let me just look at what we were going to talk about. Okay, so yes, one of the biggest problems, three major problems that I found when I first started Clo. One was the avatars, which we talked about in the first two sessions. The second one was finding patterns, which we're going to talk about today. And the third one was finding accurate materials that we can use in Clo. And so my answers for those are basically the same as what we said during the first week. You have to figure out what the physical properties of the fabric that you want are, and you have to figure out what the visual properties are. And the thing to remember in Clo is that you can always combine any physical property with any digital, with any Any physical property with any visual property. So you can take a muslin fabric and put lace on it, and it will have the physical characteristics of muslin, but it will look like a lace. Okay, so let's see. So my workaround for this is to find a fabric, to start with a fabric that has the physical quality that I want. And my go-to in Clo normally is to start with, if we're doing intimate apparel, I'll share my screen now so that I can show you what I'm talking about. Just give me a second, let me open a file. I'm actually going to open a new file for us. Can you all see this here? It's a blank, it should be a blank screen, nothing on it. Okay. So
there is a triangle. There's a triangle on.
Okay, hang on. Let me try that again.
While Trudy's setting that up, guys, I know in our first session, people were writing where they were dialing in from, and we really loved seeing that. So if you guys want to comment and
yeah, share where you are.
Shout out where you're calling from. Yeah, we love where you're to hear where you guys are watching from.
Yeah,
okay,
super fun.
All right. Okay, so in the library in Clo, we have our fabric section here, and these are the fabrics that come stocked in Clo when you first open the program. If you double click on the fabric, these are all the fabric that you have here, all the properties that you have. Usually with intimate apparels, if I'm not going to get my fabric from somewhere else, I stick with the knits. Where's the knits?
Man, it must be really early in Australia. I see somebody over there. What time is it there?
So I usually stick in this section here. And if I hover over these fabrics, you can see that it gives me a pop out of what the properties of this fabric are and what they will look like. So that's my standard go-to. That's where I start. And if, like, let's say I pick cotton jersey, if I go over into the object browser, I can see that cotton jersey has now been added. If I look in the property editor and I scroll down and under the property editor, you can see under texture, there's a map here. Under normal map, there's a map here. Under color, that's just a color swatch, it's not a map. And sometimes there might be a displacement map, and there might be a roughness map somewhere in here as well. If I don't want the visual properties of this fabric, I can delete them right here. And now I'll have a blank canvas when I apply that to my fabric. So it's gonna drape like a knit cotton jersey, but it's going to look just like plain. I have nothing applied to it right now. Now, if I want to give this a visual property, I can grab a texture map from our library over here. Now, this is our library that we've been developing with Kristen Anderson. And if I want to give it a new visual property, I'm going to go to our fabrics, our images, and I'm just going to grab one of these. Like that's a nice one. I'm going to drag it over, drop it into the texture property here. And you can see that it now looks like, if I select that, so now it looks like lace, it's going to drape like a knit cotton jersey. Does that make sense to everybody?
Okay. I think it does, but I think it takes a second of getting used to using the textures. Sometimes, personally, when I first was starting, I remember that I kept putting them in the displacement map section, and that did not work. So you got to make sure you're in the right section. And it might be if you just click on the like little trash can on the far right to remove it, that is how you can like wipe it out. Just a kind reminder.
It can also be a bit confusing because when we're applying a texture, we're more or less applying a print to something. Whereas if you actually want to get like reflective qualities and like thickness qualities in your renderings, that's going to be in your normal map section.
Yep.
So that's where you can actually, tell Clo in the program when you're setting up lights in a rendered environment, how you want that fabric to reflect so it actually appears like it has different thicknesses, which lace is a good example where we'll have areas that don't have any thickness because it's transparent, and then we'll have thicker areas where there's thicker threads. But when you're just applying the texture, you're just applying basically an image on top of the fabric, and that image can have texture, like it can look like images of fabric, so it can look like a texture.
Yeah, and I would earmark that if this is something you guys want us to go into a little bit deeper, we can look at textures a little bit more. Just as a basic overview, it's important to understand you have your physical properties and you have visual properties. Visual properties we can do in Photoshop and other programs like Adobe Substance. Physical properties, you have to get them either from Clo, or there's something I was going to share with you. On something that I've found, something I've been playing around with to measure my fabric's physical properties and bring them into Clo. That's coming up a little bit later in the slide, so I'm going to save it. The other question that we had was about cross-platform versatility. So basically, this comes down to Clo3D and Browseware, and they don't play together. Their files just don't. You can't bring in a fabric file from Browseware, and you can't bring out a fabric file from Clo. But there is a workaround that you can use. If you can open your file in Browseware, I actually downloaded it this week to have a look at it. So can you see this? Or you probably can't see the screen. Okay.
We're only seeing Clo right now, yeah.
Okay, let me share. So I'm gonna just open Browseware real quick. Okay, so here's a fabric over here on the right-hand side that I have in Browseware. And if you look here, you can see that the idea is similar. It has a diffuse map. That's the same thing as a texture map in Clo. It has an alpha map, which is an opacity map. It has a specular map, it has roughness map, and here's the normal map. These are the ones that we're usually concerned with, is our diffuse map, our normal map, and maybe our alpha map if required. Alpha is transparency. If you go to this section in Browseware and then click on it, and if you go to edit, it'll open up this image in Photoshop. You can export that image as a PNG, and then you could use that as a map in Clo. Does that make sense? That's my workaround for using Clo and Browseware files.
It's a little bit of a bummer because you kind of have to have Browseware to be able to do it.
Yeah. Except unless you have I have U3MA files from Browseware that are not like, they're like folders that I can open. I can go into those files and look at the maps. They're older files, so I don't know if that's different now, but and you can go the other way too. You can take your maps out of Clo and bring them into Browseware that way. Another thing we talked about, let me stop sharing here. Another thing we talked about was asking your vendors. There's a lot of factories and fabric suppliers that are starting to create digital fabrics to represent their real fabrics. A good place to look at is VMod for that. If you go into VMod, you can look at their digital fabrics, and a lot of those fabrics are linked to physical fabrics. So if you go onto the site, you can click on the fabric and then it'll take you over to Swatch On, which will show you what the physical fabrics actually look like. A few other lace suppliers that we know that are doing this are Shanty Lace, Tianhai Lace, and Carvico. And I answered this question about Browseware and U3MA files. Okay, and then I was also going to talk about creating materials with physical properties in Clo. Okay, so let me share again. Okay, so this is something, it took me a while to kind of like explore, but if you go to the drop down up here and you go to Fabric Emulator, that's what I just went to. So right here, Fabric Emulator, you get this warning, proceed. Okay, so you can input your the measurements that you take of your fabrics in Clo. Normally, this is only available to Clo Enterprise users. And when you get the Clo Enterprise package, you get these little contraptions that you can measure your fabric with. You get a digital force gauge that measures the pull or the stretch of your fabric. You get this, that's part of that, I think. You get something that like bends, that tests the bend of your fabric, and you get a scale. And you get this little, like a template to cut out like exactly what the measurements of your fabric are. And so I have a little like at-home hack workaround that I use for this. To measure the digital force or the pull of my fabric, I use a luggage, something like a handheld luggage scale. To measure the bend of my fabric, I use a dictionary that's exactly the appropriate height off of the table, and I use that to measure like how much my bend of the fabric is as I push it off the dictionary. I made my own little template to measure out the fabrics. A scale, you can use just like a digital kitchen scale for that. And then as you go through the emulator, you can create a new fabric, and then you select next. And then it basically tells you everything that you need to do. You cut out your fabrics to these proportions, you weigh them on the scale, input the number, you measure the thickness of the fabric. Oh, I didn't talk about this one. To measure the thickness of the fabric, you measure it against some paper, and every paper is like 0.01 milliliters, 0.01 millimeters. And then the bend, I said I do this with a dictionary. Anyways, you go through that, and I'm going to give you a little link to where I found the hack for this because it's super fun. And if you want to play around with it and let me know what your results are, I would love to hear. So can you drop that in the chat for me, Riley? It's on our page here, the fabric emulator, and there's a DIY version of it. All right, I think that's all I had to say about fabrics. Is there any questions?
I think we're good. I think we're good. Okay, so I am going to be the one to walk you guys through some of the first pattern creating items in our agenda. I also want you to bear with me because I'm one of the noobiest noobs of all the noobs that are in Clo. So I think you know, as it comes out, like, just realize that I'm still new, I'm learning. I get frustrated a lot with this because I want to be better than I am, and it's natural. And I think you'll see that when I start sharing my screen and walking you through some of this. The first thing I want to walk you through is how to fix your screen so that you've got both of them. Oops. I want to show both of my ladies, so I'm going to fix that there, and I'm going to share the patterns that we already have. So this is, I think this is everything that, you know, makes up this garment right here. But I'm going to bring in a different pattern because we don't want to look at her anymore. We're going to archive her, hide her away for a minute. Sorry for the naked lady. So to bring in your DXF files from a pattern, like a splier, you would go to the file import add. So if you do import and you don't add, it will open a whole new file, but I'm going to add it to this one. So I'm going to do import add DXF, and then I've prepped a couple of them. So I'm going to open this one and show you what this guy looks like. I don't make any changes here. We just kind of keep it as is. You can make changes depending on the options and whatnot, but I'm not going to. And then it's going to bring in my pattern file. For some reason, it's way over here. I'm going to move it closer to my lady, and get close to the shadow because I feel like that's always easier. And this is like a really basic pattern. So one thing you're going to notice is that all of the pattern pieces are not on the right rotation. So I'm going to rotate it, select it all, and then hold the shift key so that I can rotate it. Oh, can somebody mute, please?
Okay, dites-le.
And then this is actually the pattern for the cup. And this is actually like a tie. This is the under bust. So you can see once you orient yourself, it actually looks not that dissimilar to our cup here. It's a different style. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think it goes maybe with this. I don't know. I'd have to look at my pattern pieces in my technical pack, but that's how you import a file. So that's really important. One of the big things to be able to do is bring it into Clo, just baseline level. The next thing you want to be able to do is export it when you're done working on it, because you want to be able to give it back to your factory and say, here, I changed it. I did some things, do it, use this pattern next. So if you want to export your pattern, you can do it multiple ways. You can do it without selecting anything, and you can just go here and export DXF. And this will export everything. I'm going to write test export. This will export everything. This screen pops up. You want to change your scale to the scale that you're sending, your specs in. I think depending on what you're using, we tend to use inches and centimeters most often, but it really depends on your factory partner and whatnot. So this looks like it's in inches because I feel like it's a size large, and that's definitely not a centimeter. So I'm going to put it in inches, and then if you don't have grading attached, you're going to want to not export with grading. But if you want to export with grading, then you're going to uncheck that. And then we don't really change a lot of these. I'm curious if anybody else on my team or in the group has anything to say about this screen, but I don't generally change anything else here.
This is a good place where you can, under size format, if we did have grading attached to this is where you can also export a rule file if you're sharing grading.
Yes, that's a good point.
And one more thing I could add in there is under DXF format, you have a drop down there at the very top. And so if your pattern didn't come into the factory appropriately the first time, you can try different formats.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, sometimes our patterns come in really small and weird, and we have to figure it out. And sometimes we try exporting as all of the formats to understand like which format works for which factory, because not everybody's using the same software to create their patterns. And so sometimes like we'll do an experiment where we export everything as AAMA, as inch, then centimeter, and then we'll do the same thing with the other two and just send them all, and then we'll be like, okay, which one actually opens like it's supposed to? And another way we can figure that out is by exporting as a PDF. So if you export as a PDF, then that's another way for them to like cross-check. We also tend to put in like boxes that we label, like a 5-inch box that is, they can set it up so that they can, scale the box, and then everything else is scaled to match. So that is something they can like decipher once they have it. So this is one way you can do it. I'm going to click OK. There's another way you can do it where like there's a lot of patterns on my screen. So this took everything that I was working on and it exported all of them. But maybe I don't want them to export all of them, because we typically tend to archive patterns when we are like done with that version of the fitting. So like the pattern, pretend this pattern is like the first round, and I've already like done with it. And now I have changes that I want to apply, and this is the new pattern. So if I wanted to just send them just this pattern, I would select all of these patterns. I would go up, do the same thing, export as DXF. I'll do export, test export, new pattern only. And then I hit save. And now you want to hit at the very bottom here, export selected patterns. And that will export all of your selected patterns and nothing else on the board. And then the other thing to note here is that you can also get stuck if you are unaware of certain things. One time it happened to me and I was super frustrated. We have different size groups here. So sometimes your patterns can end up in a different size group. And if they are part of a different size group, then you will have trouble, because maybe this is in this size group as a size large, and maybe this piece is in this group as a size large, and it will only export the one that you're selecting on that screen. Monica had referenced it a little bit when she was here. We'll do this again. I'm going to replace it because I don't really care. Oh, you can't actually select it. That's really frustrating. But I think it's because I only have one item selected. But
yeah, there's no grading applied to any of those patterns. So even though like it shows you the grading at the side, that's only if like after you apply that grading. You know what I mean? Like although the grading is like prepped, it's not the pattern's not actually graded, so it doesn't recognize a graded net. Yeah.
Gotcha. I also opened a whole bunch of other patterns earlier to try and figure out which one I was going to show you export and importing. So that's probably also why I have all these different groups. But all right.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the big things. They're like the most important things. If you go into the export and you do PDF, that's another one that I had just suggested we do. And that gives you a totally different screen. You just kind of have to go through and check what you want. But more important than anything is importing and exporting as a DXF, because your factory will actually be able to open those and use them. PDFs are only like to double check things. All right.
But you can, one thing to note too is that those PDFs can be opened in Adobe Illustrator.
Yes, that is helpful. That is helpful because you can label things and do anything there that you need to like address with your factory. All right. So the big important tools in the 2D window that we tend to use are, generally speaking, in this corner of the world, the polygon, the rectangle, the ellipse, and the spiral. I'm going to say that the polygon is probably one of your most important ones. We want to remind you, I'm going to delete this for a minute just to show you what I'm talking about. Move her too, just to get her out of my way, but I can't move her. All right, I'm going to ignore her. Anyway, one thing to note is that you have this shadow, that's the avatar, and it is really helpful to use the shadow. So don't be a stranger to her, because she will help you, create reference points that you want. You'll know where it lands on her body. So you can use this tool. It's very similar to what the pen tool in AI is like. You can just map out. I'm going to make a dart in here. And then, yeah, you can create like a closed shape. You can also create a shape and a pattern by, using the rectangle tool. And instead of, tracing it the way I just did, you could add point breaks. So you would go into the edit pattern tool and then add a point or a line split. And you can start to map out where you would like to, map your strap platform and where your side seam goes and where, you're putting your dart opening and your neckline. And then you can start to transform these areas with the, oops. You can start to take these and change them by using curve points. So this is like a curve point. I just manipulating the angles of everything to kind of just start shaping the pattern piece and figure out, how you want it to go, where you want the shape to start framing out as. You can add another line split in here to create a dart. And I mean, you've got a really early start to a cup shape here. And, once you start sewing it up and adding the other elements, it starts to come together a little bit more. But generally speaking, those between the polygon and the rectangle, you can do it different ways. The spiral and the ellipse are different. They're not as useful, I personally find in this. The spiral is really good for making something like a flounce, but it's a little bit of a tricky tool to use. We tend to just hand draw our flounces at this point. The fullness tool is also another one that we really like in this realm. So maybe in here, if I had my dart, go ahead.
If I jump in, do you mind making this 2D full screen and removing the side for those who have smaller screens so they can see it a little bit bigger?
Sure. I'm like, not sure how to, okay.
Yeah,
There you go. Yeah, no, it was like Zoom got in the way. All right. Was that it, Monica? Or did you have other things? Okay, cool. So another thing we use here is the fullness point tool. So maybe I'm looking at this and I feel like the opening of the dart doesn't seem like it's quite wide enough. So one way to use this tool is to like pick your point that you want to start and open, and now you can start to like rotate it in a little bit, and that it created some weirdness here, but you can go back and take the curve and I think delete the curve point there. And so I opened it a little bit. I opened it like this amount. And once you do that, you might realize like, hey, I want to level out my strat platform. Maybe you want to go in and add a curve point into your dart so that your dart isn't totally straight. So I'm going to add a curve point. You might want to, they're not trued up, so you might want to adjust the length of them. Oops, I think I have to do Control Z and then change length. So maybe I don't want it to be 1.744. Maybe I want it to just be 2 even. And you can see what's happening when you add to that. So you could add it to the start, you could add it to the ends, you could add it to both. I'm going to add it to, I think I added it to end or both. I'm going to change this one to also match, and this one I'm adding to the start because I think that makes the most sense. And so now I've got a dart that's trued up, and it's relatively normal looking for what you expect a dart to look like in a bra. Then I would say the other tools that we have, and I'm trying to look at my notes, so forgive me. Oh, this is a good one. So, when you have a dart, it's always good to double check like what your dart looks like when it's closed. So to do that, you just double click, copy your pattern. You can anchor your dart on top of each other, and then you double click the little activation point and you can drag it so that it closes. So now you can see like the bottom line of your pattern. It actually doesn't look that far off from what I would expect the bottom of a closed dart shape to look like. I might just say that like this seems to be like not perfect, so maybe I would straighten it. If you wanted to get more projection, you might actually lengthen it here because you might want to like give some bell-shaped curve to the bottom cup. But generally speaking, it's always good to like double check what your pattern looks like when you close the dart. And then I'll delete that one, just that. We also wanted to talk through some of the like lesser important tools, but still relative and relevant. So one of those is the edit curvature. So this is just like a tool. When you turn it on, you're just like changing the depth of the curve, and where you drag, it sort of drags the depth of the curve to that point. So you can go really dramatic and do something like that. And then when you look at editing the curvature, or wait, is it editing? It is actually a curve point. So I'm going to convert. No, that didn't work. I don't know what I was thinking here.
I think you got Bezier handles like after the first, or is that a curve point there?
What do you mean?
Like I think you added that curve point, but I think when you first use the curvature tool, you got Bezier handles. Yeah. This one's Bezier handles. So if you hit Z right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That is exactly what I was trying to do. Thank you. So these are Bezier handles, and they they are okay for using to adjust your curve, but they don't really change very well. So when you have this, it's kind of like each one is sort of independent, and it doesn't really like maintain its shape very well. So like if you wanted to really, make this a really adjustable curve, then you would probably want to convert to a curve point, and then the Bezier handles disappear and you have your like more proper curve that is a little bit easier to use. I would also this is like where it like added the curve points actually to that shape so that it could maintain that after you removed the Bezier handles and turned it into like a real curve with curve
Also,
points.
one thing to note with curve points is that if you ever have Bezier handles in your pattern, it will, if you're ever grading your pattern, it's going to convert those Bezier handles to curve points. So ideally, you want to be working with curve points whenever possible.
Yeah, I don't love the Bezier handles in general. Like I feel like they're really hard to manipulate, and like I prefer curve points for sure. I think it just makes a lot more sense into my designer brain. Um, another thing you can do, I'm trying to think about how to show you well. You can edit, actually, how would I optimize the curve points, or how would I make it so that they had a billion curve points? Because sometimes when you make a curve, you end up with like lots of tiny little curve points.
Yeah, try doing like a super curvy line or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you go back a bit and go back to, yeah, or make a curvature line that has like maybe like a more exaggerated S curve, and then yeah, try that, and then convert to curve.
Convert.
Mhm.
I guess I just have to.
Z.
Oh wait, I could
Yes.
just do D, but then I have D.
So
Ah,
C, and then right click.
Okay, so if you're adding a curve point now, you're not going to get a
oh,
million curve points.
oh, okay, I get it. I have to, yeah, right click. I got you guys. And now it actually doesn't have that many,
Mhm.
which is crazy. But sometimes you get like hundreds of them, or like 30 that are just all along this line. I'm surprised it didn't give me more actually, because this is a really crazy shape. But so you can. Nope, that's not it. I think this is like where I'm like, it gets really frustrating sometimes when you don't know what you're doing.
I have
All
a
right,
quick
so
theory on the curve points. I wonder if it has something A to do with the particle distance that we have the pattern piece set at, or B because we're in inches scale, not centimeters, which is what we're typically in. And the scale, like the inch versus centimeter is a little bit different. So I don't know, just thinking out loud here about why it could be giving us like a better option right now than it has been.
I don't know. It's really interesting. I do not know here. This is something that we could well actually I could just do it with this one. So there's the smooth curve tool, and I feel like that always gives me like weird things. So oops, I feel like that did not work. The side that will be put in place. Oh, I just don't know sometimes. I feel like things work in theory and then they don't. Okay. I'm gonna go back and add. No, I'm not. I'm gonna do the edit curvature and just see if no, that didn't work. Okay. I'm not sure.
No, that makes like that's good, Kristen. Bottom line, there's different ways to add curves. You have the curvature tool that gives you Bezier handles, and you have the curve point tool, which gives you curve points. And you can go from Bezier handles to curve points, which you usually want to end up doing.
Yeah, and you can always take a point that is not a curve point and convert it to a curve point, which by right clicking, I also have the command shortcut or the shortcut D. But you might not want to do that depending on where it is, like this. Makes a weird blobby pattern piece. All right. I think I'm going to let Monica share her screen and show us some of the 3D tool windows, the 3D tools for making patterns, because those are also kind of cool and a little underused at the moment. Thank you for bearing with me in my struggle bus of that.
I think it's really interesting to see a designer, working through patterns and how you can utilize that.
Yeah. I love patterns.
Yeah.
They're so fun.
We had a couple questions pop up. Clarabelle just asked about if you have to change like the text size when you're looking at the measurements. And we actually just recently figured this out because it's hidden, and it's settings, user interface, scroll down to appearance, and it's actually called line length size, which doesn't make any sense, but you can go in and change this. Let's say I go from 13 to 10, and it will change the appearance of what those numbers are, which is super helpful, especially if you're going between screens like some of us are.
Yeah,
and then
much bigger. I'm 13.
Yeah. I'm going to do that right now, Monica. I love it.
And then if you're trying to smooth out a bunch of curve points, for instance, well, I don't have a lot, but let's say we have like a bunch of curve points in here. You can right click, and it's optimize curve points, and then you're given like a little dialog box, and you can say the percentage of what the amount of curve points are. So if you have 100 curve points, let's say, and you want to minimize that down to like 5, then you would go down to 5%. And then it'll show you how much the curve adjusts according to how many curve points you have. So
Thank you so much.
Like that.
That was something I wanted to show and I forgot how.
One more thing, since we're here, that we might want to show, if you have like not curve points, but like regular points, like your add point split line, if you just have a bunch of those, you can convert those curve points as well.
Right. So I just press X to add some non-curve points, and you can right click and do convert to curve point, and that will give you a curve point, which we have added to be a hotkey as D, which I don't even know what D was originally, but I guess I don't use it very much.
I don't think it was anything, because I think I double checked before I made mine.
But I use that so often.
I do too.
Because yeah, sometimes, especially if you have elastics, let's say you have an elastic applied to a segment and you go in to add a curve point, and then, or if you go in to add a segment point and then turn that into a curve point, sometimes it'll remove that elastic, which can get frustrating. So yeah, that's a little alternate, but okay, so I was going to show you guys how you can make a pattern live tracing on the avatar, which is pretty cool and super great for us who are doing like body contour, like, intimates, things are close to the body, because this isn't something that you could necessarily do if you're like trying to make, an A-line dress. This could be good for like corsetry and whatnot. But you go to the 3D pen tool, which is right here. So under here, you have the 3D pen tool, and then you have flatten, which is very important. We'll get to in a second. So you go to the 3D pen tool, and then you can start drawing on the body. And if you do one click, it's going to give you a like segment point, like an angled point. But if you hold commands or control on a PC, it'll give you a curve point. So let's say I want to make
hold and drag.
Yes. Well, not on trackpad.
Oh,
4 months.
That's why we have so many. That's why it's so hard. I'm convinced.
So we'll do like a center front line. Let's bring it to here. And then I'll hold command and select and do, you know, some nice little curves through here. Let's bring it up. Let's bring up like a side seam, make a little armhole, a little high point strap platform, a little neckline, and then we'll close just by double clicking. And then let's say from there, we wanted to add, let's add like a princess seam. So I'll continue with the same tool, select, let's like say we want to separate the strap platform and do a princess seam over the apex. So I'll hold command, select, and bring it down, let's say, I don't know, to there. Does that look about right? Okay, about right. And then now we have 2 sections and we can go in here to flatten. And let's say I want to select this piece as well as this one. You have to make sure that these are all kind of tied together. Like they actually connect at the ends to make, you know, full pieces. And then I'll select both of those and hit enter, and it will go ahead and give me those pieces. And it's not perfect, as we all probably know quite a bit, that it's very tricky to work on the Clo form, especially if you're doing like bodycon things around the bust and the crotch. So for instance, this overbust seam is they're different lengths. This one's 9 5/8 and this one's 9 1/4. So they're 3/8 off. So you would have to go in and, you know, make like little changes to make those a bit more accurate and closer to what you would want. But this is a good way to start if you need to go in and make some type of like interesting bodysuits really quick and you're not really sure where to even start with that. So yeah.
I have a question, Monica. So if you're doing that and say you're somebody who is not as familiar with patterns, so I'm kind of speaking from somebody else's perspective, not my own, but if you drew that and you didn't know to put the princess seam in, does Clo know how to handle giving you bust projection, or is that something you have to figure out?
No, you'd have to, you mean,
You
I
could
mean,
probably
it
put
did
on the
give us
measurements.
bust projection. It did. It's not, you know, the greatest placement of it.
I think the question was though, if you didn't have a
patterns.
princess seam there.
What is it?
If you didn't have a princess seam, like if you just delete that line and let's see the pattern that it comes out with.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like it won't dart it for you. It'll just make a pattern that sort of looks like that, but not.
Yeah,
It's
great.
Yeah. So like Monica knows already that it's going to need, so yeah, that is a limitation in Clo. Like the patterns that it spits out from what you draw on the avatar are sometimes just crazy. You really have to understand pattern making to understand how a good pattern is going to work in real life.
Yeah, I would say it's actually one of the more important parts of using Clo. I've heard it last week. We kind of heard that some of the fit model agencies don't think of Clo as a technical tool. They think of it more as a design tool, which I think is bananas because you have to understand pattern making on a very deep level to understand what you're putting in and what it comes back with, because it will not work if you have a very base, you know, small level of pattern making. It'll be, you know, your patterns they might look okay on your Clo form, but they won't be production able patterns. You won't be able to like make a garment that looks and fits really well. I mean, I think when you're using it in conjunction with fitting on real models, it can be a really laser focused tool. But if you're not, and if you're just kind of wishy-washy and making things out of nowhere land and you don't know patterns very well, your patterns aren't going to be really usable at the end of the day.
And you find there's tons, like if you go into Clo Set and look at the patterns, like 90% of those patterns are not very good patterns. Even though they look okay as a 3D model, they're not usable production patterns.
Yeah.
And so when I made all those pieces just now, they're already automatically sewed, which is nice. So anywhere that those pieces were butted up against each other when flattened, they're already sewn. So you can see here, like the overbust seam is sewn, the side seam is already sewn. The like front strap platforms are already sewn. So where it needs to go. So.
Yeah, so I mean, it's cool. It's cool as like as a design tool, like what Monica's doing here. If we just want to have a quick look at what our style lines look like, if we want to proceed with this type of garment, she can go in and she can add different fabrics to it, and she could add, you know, she could mess around the style lines now. But after we're like, yep, it's a design tool, we could be like, yep, good to go. Let's proceed with that pattern, and then you would want to make a good pattern from it.
Yeah, and you might want to also, once you have the baseline pattern like this, you might also want to import fabric or something like the fabric that you're going to be using, so that you can see what it's going to actually do in a fabric close enough to, you know, your intent. Where like this is just like a baseline stretchy fabric that's just nothing. Like it's just a really basic fabric that, you know, doesn't really show you as much as what you'd like to see, probably, if you're using this for work. But I think another aspect of this is kind of like, where do you even get patterns? Because patterns are like when you're first starting out, like you can definitely get them from Clo3D, but like what we've seen is that like they kind of don't necessarily all translate into good patterns. So you want to usually start from a good pattern if you can, or understand pattern making on your own, on some level yourself. If you don't understand pattern making, or you know, you don't have a lot of experience with that, I would highly recommend getting some books, which we're going to show you in the next. Actually, I'm just going to probably.
Yep. I just wanted to show you guys how quickly you
Yeah.
can kind of put together like a rough garment if you're able to like use that tool. So
yeah,
sharing
it is really cool. It is really cool.
I mean, it's super cool. I just wanted to like make sure, people know, use it to design, check it out, and then check your patterns. Yeah.
Check your patterns, yeah, because they don't always look good after that. You never know. You got to have a good understanding of projection and what you need from a pattern to make it work, and what your pattern material, what your material is going to do, what your grain line is going to do. All of those things help and they contribute. And you know, you can still learn a lot from just using Clo. So it's definitely like a trial by error, trial by fire kind of tool, rather, not trial by error. But so this is one idea of how you could find some patterns and get them into Clo. You know, using home sewing patterns are a great tool. They're going to come in as PDFs, which you can pull into Clo as a PDF or as an image. Trudy's going to walk us through that really quick right at the end here. You can also look for pattern drafting books. We're going to send this slide out too. Just don't forget, we'll send the slide out in the recap tomorrow. But these are all different books that I personally own and I look at regularly when I'm drafting patterns. And when I'm looking at things and I don't know what I'm looking at, I'm like going back to the drawing board. What do the pattern books say? How do they look at their pattern shapes and whatnot? You can also try Googling for pattern shapes. Like try bra sewing pattern and things will come up. Pajama pants sewing pattern, things will come up. It will give you the idea and the general shape of these things. It's not going to give you like the exact thing you want or need probably, but it's a good starting point and it's something to reference as you go through the process yourself. And then I think I'm gonna stop sharing. I know we're running up on our time. It feels like it goes so fast every time.
We can go on tangents. We can just go down a channel and just keep going.
So Trudy's gonna show us a little bit about how to trace a pattern. And I think if you could show us by doing the Google a pattern and show us that way.
Yeah.
Hillary, I love it.
Renee asked a question if you can layer created pattern over a block to perfect. And I think that's a bit similar to what we're about to discuss, actually, how you can import a pattern into play. Yeah.
Yeah, so like those home sewing patterns, they come as PDFs, and usually the way I end up doing it is bringing them into Clo as an image that I can trace. And so we're going to do a quick Google search. We're going to find a pattern, and then we're going to bring that into Clo, and we're going to trace it out. So I will share my screen. And I will open Google.
You're just like me. You've got a billion.
A million things open. Okay,
Yup.
can you see this? You can see my Google search
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
All right, let's pick a pattern together. Which one do we like?
Can you make them bigger? There you go.
This
I'm
one?
like leaning in, let me see the patterns.
What do they look like?
That seems fine for now.
Yeah.
All right.
Pull her in.
All right, I'm just gonna grab a screenshot of that. And then I'm gonna open Clo. I'm gonna grab my screenshot over here.
She just wrote panty patterns, I believe.
Yeah, I just Googled panty patterns.
And also, like, I add the word sewing pattern to things a lot because I think that you can find more when you add sewing, because pattern might also be conflated with like a print, a graphic.
All right, so I'm just taking my image, my screenshot, and I'm putting it on my pattern. And so this adds it as a texture right now, which is fine. Like we can work with it right now. But the other way I like to do it is to add a graphic image. So here's my graphic image. I'm going to go to my screenshots.
So many ladies wearing lingerie.
Screenshots are my life. Okay, and so now we have this as a graphic image, and it's not to scale. We are just going to start. Good enough, like that. So I'm going to use my edit pattern tool, or sorry, my polygon tool, shortcut H, and I'm just going to trace out this pattern. So this
Thanks
is
for
kind
sharing, Laura.
of a review of what.
And you can do this on the half, this pattern on the half.
Of what we did with Kristen earlier. So everybody has their own like different way of how they like to trace things and use the tools. This is the way I do it.
And the thing to keep in mind is that like this is like, it looks kind of like a hipster panty of sorts. You know, it's got more full coverage on the back seat, and it's got a low, like, kind of scoopy curvy leg. This is a hipster. If you didn't want a hipster, you just need to like kind of think about the design lines and how they might shift and change to create a different panty. So for a bikini, the whole thing might just move up and sit up a little higher. You might, you know, shorten the side seam to make it so that it's not as full coverage in the back. You might shorten the back crotch gusset seam to also reduce some of the back seat coverage. It's all about just kind of knowing sort of what the shapes you're looking for are, and then manipulating the shapes of the patterns to match what your design intent is. We don't recommend, you know, copying patterns that are for sale like this exactly. Like, you know, first of all, they're not going to fit everybody exactly the same. Your fit model might be different than the sizes here, but this is a really good tool for like referencing shapes, understanding the shapes you're looking for, and then like learning how to manipulate them so that they can be more appropriate for your designs.
All right, so I basically just traced out those. I'm just gonna get rid of this for now. And so this is a good place to start. That, and that's the back, and that's the gusset. So she's tiny, so let's just scale her all up together. Something like that. And then like that. And then there's your basic panty, like that's your starting place for it. And then you can go over to your avatar.
think that's
She's
one of
got
the really
two-
cool things about Clo is you can do like what Kristen was saying, like once you put it on the avatar and sew it up, then you can like play with the side seam and the seat coverage and all that, you know, without knowing how to use a pattern. And it'll just
Yeah.
pattern.
So I'm just gonna like measure her circumference, probably where we want the pattern to sit. And her circumference is 88.4. And I'm gonna divide that by 4 to get the length of the pattern piece.
$22.1.
Monica's our mental math wizard. What was it, Monica?
22.1.
So you might want to reduce it slightly to make it like
For
hover
like
a
an
little more.
elasticated fabric.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Monica. 20.
22.1.
And we're gonna do it from the end because we want a straight from the end. Okay. And then her hip, we'll probably keep that straight for now. And then we could decide like how long on her, how wide we want that hip piece to be. So we can measure that on here as well. What's a standard length? Something like maybe 2 inches there.
Yeah. 2, maybe 3. Would
Maybe
that
3 if
Yeah,
it's
for
a hipster.
3 sounds good.
So we'll just put, or centimeters, about 5, you think?
That's like 2 inches. It would probably be more like 7.5.
Yeah,
If it was-
7.3.
And then we'll make this. I'm going to convert this to a curve point. And we probably want our gusset width to be around 4.44 centimeters on the half.
That's not so bad. I would say the real thing is like the midpoint, the narrowest part of the gusset really needs to be somewhere between 2.5 to 2 3/4 for most women.
So we could find exactly what that midpoint is. I'm just going to use my add point split line tool, which is shortcut X. I'm going to right click on that line, if I can grab it.
It also doesn't necessarily have to go exactly in the midpoint. It's more like
Third up.
a third up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
could do thirds as well. So same thing, add point split line, and then we're going to put 3 segments here. And then we can add, that's probably too high, you think?
Oh, that looks good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so then so our narrowest part of the gusset is, what's a good standard for that?
3.5 on the half. 3.5 centimeters on the half.
So we like 3.5 there, and then we can bring this in. Oops. And then we make this curve look nice. See, I have the Bezier handles and they suck, so I can just grab that, convert to curve point, and that's not so bad. Same thing here. Convert to curve point. And then I can modify that to make it look a little bit better, match these up.
Yep.
Match these up. And maybe modify that a little bit.
Yeah, make the leg have a smoother transition. It might be that you need to shorten the 4.70 too. I think 4.70 seems pretty big actually on second look.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would nudge it in a smidge. Yeah, that's probably a little better. See, if I was doing it, I would probably eliminate some of these curve points and just have like one in the mid, like where the narrowest is, and then just try and like eliminate extra ones, because then it starts to get like, yeah, that's not a curve point, that's what it is, the like straight across ones. Yeah, that looks better. And then, you know, the front leg needs some minor shaping, but you've got
Yes,
some.
we could go on and on, but
Yes.
that's the big, we like,
Let's fix
this team
it.
could go on for the next hour playing around with those lines.
We do sometimes. That is
Yes.
sort of the inspiration of intimate conversations in Clo, is that we just end up talking about patterns and looking at them for hours on end and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until we can't tweak anymore, which is pretty much never.
Yeah, pretty
like
much.
we can
pretty much.
just keep going.
And then we'll come back to it tomorrow and we'll keep tweaking it some more.
Yes.
I have a workflow question. If
sure.
you, I know we're over time.
It's okay. It's okay. We always go over, and we have time for a few questions. So if anybody has any, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming. If anybody has to run, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you all. So if you were doing that pattern, and I know part of the beauty of Clo is seeing the 3D, would you want to maybe, if you're not quite sure how to manipulate that pattern, would you want to maybe like sew it up and put it on and simulate it, so then you can kind of continue tweaking the pattern, and then you can simulate and tweak and simulate and tweak?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is definitely like the very next step. It's like, you know, we just only have so much time in an hour to get to, but like sewing and simulating on the form, totally going to be a game changer for how you like can fit that panty and how much like finesse you can give to it, so that you have like a really awesome starting point. I love it.
Ooh. Well, I like Hillary's question. How do you balance with the reality of a gusset and a seat with limitations of avatars and crotches?
I think part of that is the A-frame pose that we do with our like legs kind of spread a little bit. I mean, it's never going to be perfect in Clo, but crotches are, we all have different crotches. So,
and I think it's also knowledge. Like even when we're sitting, you guys are more experienced with me, and that's exactly what I do. I go to somebody or I reference a pattern. What's a normal crotch width? What's a normal front crotch gusset width? Like if you try to go off the avatar in Clo, it just gets narrower and narrower until you get like something that works, but it'll never work in real life. So knowledge, that's where like that base knowledge just comes in. If you have somebody you can ask, or a pattern that you can reference.
Yeah,
it's the same thing that goes for crotches on a form, where I could
they like
reduce that to be a centimeter and somehow it'd still be bubbling.
Yeah, it's also like a pet peeve of mine. I really hate narrow crotches. We just literally had a debate, and I like said we're putting this in the SOPs because I need to like have a standard. Our crotches are 7 centimeters across at the narrowest, unless it's a thong. If it's a thong, all bets are off. But if it's a regular panty, I do not want her to have a tiny gusset, because you know, if you wear a tiny gusset and you've ever had a panty or a bikini or something like that, there's something that happens and it is really uncomfortable if it happens to you.
Yes. Yeah, I think 2 and 3 ace is the narrowest I have my team make anything anymore. Like, a lot of times we'll lean to like 2.5.
Yeah.
Another pet peeve is when people grade it though, and you get on the plus, and she's got a 4-inch like crotch narrow. So I'm like, come on, guys.
We're not growing there. Nobody's growing there that much.
especially when you think about how like plus people usually have fuller legs, so like they don't have a thigh gap. They have more things rubbing together, more friction. They don't need that much extra fabric in that area, you know. It just makes everything more uncomfortable for everyone. I saw a question: how would molded cup patterns respond in Clo? Is there a function specific to molded patterns? I don't think a lot of molded cup patterns are fantastic in Clo as far as we've seen. Like I think if you started from a pattern that you knew in Clo and you imported the DXF file, it would be an interesting experiment, because you know, when you know something already works, seeing what it looks like when you mock it up in Clo is like a really good way to like realize like how close and how far off it is. But because Clo doesn't really have great projection accountability, like if you have a super stretchy fabric, it might be okay. But it also is just, it's hard to know as like truthfully, like this is the honest truth of what's happening with this pattern. Like it's a little bit of a loaded dice, in my opinion. I'm curious if anybody else has anything to add though. Thanks, Rhonda.
Yeah, molded cups. I don't know. I fake it. Like I fake it. Just use a stretchy pattern to make it work. But yeah, not something that translates very well to real life.
Put that in as a request, Clo, to be able to mold fabric.
Yeah, we need a molder.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
And then Hillary asked if you have one version for reality and one for 3D visualization. I think this goes back to our crotch questions. We have a few workarounds that we can show maybe in a later class where we don't have to modify our pattern. We are able to maintain our pattern and get a good 3D render as well.
Yeah. I also think that going back, this is something we use on those workarounds, but one of them is steaming the garment. That might be a way to like work with the molding.
I'm sitting here on, my other screen.
That's a good idea.
With like a positive. So instead of it reducing, it's like
Mhm.
expands a bit. And that's kind of an interesting approach actually to showing.
It's just,
that would work in conjunction with steaming. Like if you add elastic on the outside and then made it bigger and then steamed, like you would probably you might be able to mold a molded cup out of that.
Yeah. I think it's just hard because the like process of molding is so unique to like the molder, the fabric, all of the things that you like put into it in real life and real time, that I don't know how to make sure it translates back and forth. But it might work with steaming. All right, I think that's it. I know that there's 36 of you still hanging around. We have really, really enjoyed this class. I really appreciate everybody coming and chiming in. We really, we love seeing you guys here. And next week is our last week. So please join. We will send out the replay tomorrow at 1 p.m. And feel free to email us if you have any questions. We love hearing from you guys. We love it. All right. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Toodles.